Okay, welcome everybody. I'm William DeMille, and I am filling in for Jared Sorensen today. We have Glenn Holloway on here with us, and super excited to have him talk to us a little bit about regenerative agriculture and how important that is to the world that we live in nowadays. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind you that we have the some great things coming up here in April 15th and 16th. We have our Regenerative Summit, and that's going to be a free event. It's online, and I will put a link in the notes here. And we have a great lineup of speakers, and I will tell you who some of those speakers are here a little bit later on. But let's go ahead and get started with Glenn. Glenn, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know who you are and where you're from and what you do, and then let's get started.
We'll go from there. Okay. Well, my full name is Douglas Glenn Holloway. If you go on Facebook, you will find my Facebook page under that name. I put in the chat already my email address, dgholloway6@gmail.com. And below that, I've got my website, www.radicalresilience.health, which we have many resources that range from farming to sustainability and also in case of a crisis. The reason that's there is that I'm a former Army officer. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps during Vietnam and then got out and became the Ag Information Chief at the University of Idaho for a couple of years. Then went back in the Army as an Army officer. I culminated that being the strategic war planner for NATO, and I wrote all the war plans for NATO and the United States over a period of 10 years, which got me into writing plans and getting so I do a lot of writing, which I still do today. But also, I transitioned from that to being the critical infrastructure chief for the United States, which, if you've ever had questions about things like, gee, what would happen if we got hit with an EMP or something like that? Well, I'm the guy who wrote the plan for that and did the assessment. And although it's not a great job to have, it definitely highlighted to me the importance of having resources, especially food and water, to sustain yourself should a crisis hit. And after doing that analysis, I realized that what we are doing now and how we are raising food now and how food is distributed and transported and processed, it's just not sustainable. And if something happens in a major crisis, generally cities have maybe 72 hours. That's all the rest of the grocery stores stock because they stock very limited amount anymore. And it all comes in from a distance. The average distance for food coming into a city is 1,500 miles. And should something happen, that supply line will quit. And if you don't have a local sustainable food system, then you're going to go without food, and we're going to start seeing some inadvertent collateral damages, as they call it. And so that's what kind of got me back into farming. I moved back to Idaho in 2013 and ran a regenerative farm up there, 1,200 acres. Spent the summer that summer with Alan Savory over in Zimbabwe. The government hired me on as the Botswana Sustainable Farming Initiative chief. And so we went back into Botswana to working on trying to get their farming systems going again. Because what had happened over there is that because most of the farm products had been taken over by South Africa and other countries, well, the men all had to go find jobs in the city, which left the women out in the country and no food production. And so we went back over, and of course, then you had the problem in what you have basically in Africa anyway, which is your drought problems, your problem with where do you get your electricity and where do those things go. So it really boiled down to having to set up systems that could be sustainable and regenerative the best they could in those areas. And that's kind of what got me where I'm at today. And I've been beating that drum for quite some time.
This is fantastic to hear. This is really neat. Sounds like you have a very colorful and interesting background. I love that.
I've done some things that most people don't, and some things that you don't want to do. 85, I was in Central America, moving from Honduras up to El Salvador when a machine gun ripped the tail rotor off my helicopter, and that got exciting for a while. But
Wow.
So
Wow.
we crash landed there and had E&E out. So I got to see the local agriculture up close and personal that I didn't want to.
Wow, that's interesting.
So this year, kind of bring it all forward, we moved down to Colorado Springs in March of 2019 because what had happened, and this is kind of going into the very first thing I probably want to talk about. What had happened in Idaho is that Moscow, Idaho, I had a farm 25 miles outside of Moscow, Idaho, on the east side. Up there, they are considered the lentil capital of the world.
Hmm.
So about 15 years ago, maybe 10, maybe 15 is a little too long, they discovered with the advent of glyphosate, which we call Roundup, that if you sprayed the ground before you planted, then you got better coverage. And if you sprayed the crop just before you harvested, then it would suck all the nutrients and the sugars up into those beans, and you had a better production. Well, that all sounds pretty good, except for the fact that the very second year they sprayed it all over those fields, the local church had 38 miscarriages due to the
Wow.
glyphosate. And this is all confirmed by a professor emeritus from Penn State by the name of Dr. Don Huber, who lives just a little north of you there in Idaho now. And what he discovered with his research on glyphosate was the fact that it literally reduced the ability for cows, sheep to conceive by over 33% and caused spontaneous abortions. Well, when he lost a third of his herd there in Penn State, he wrote Secretary Vilsack and said, listen, you didn't test this glyphosate, and here's what I'm seeing as an effect of the chemicals you're putting on not only the crops because they're eating alfalfa and things, but also going right on onto the animals. And it's affecting fertility and also causing abortions. And you need to stop it right now. And he was told that he needed to retire.
Yeah. Why is it that we always hear these horror stories? I mean, I have my ideas, but what do you
Well,
think?
because yeah, my wife would beat up on me, by the way. She's like, don't go in there with gloom and doom because, or with your sickle, you know. I went, okay, fine. But the problem is that a lot of these drugs were never properly tested. A lot of the drugs they used for COVID were never properly tested. And then we learned later on, after a couple of years of seeing these, what happens from them, then you start seeing the symptoms of their use. And glyphosate was one of those. And some of the pesticides. So the United States does some things that other countries don't. I spent 10 years in Germany. Matter of fact, my daughter's on here. She said, "Hi, Dad." I was laughing. She was born here, but the rest of the family was all born in Heidelberg. Places like Hungary, Germany, Italy, glyphosate, using it on your field is considered a felony, and you get arrested and go to jail.
Wow.
And so they're more concerned about what they're putting onto their food sources because the population is so much denser that they can't afford to use something that has a negative effect upon the population. And so they just pass laws that just say you can't do it. And Hungary made it a felony.
That's really interesting. You know, I have some family members who have spent some significant time in Europe, and they tell me that the food in the grocery stores is much higher quality than here in the United States.
That is true. They're more nutrient dense. They have less chemicals on them. Uh, Now, if you lived in Germany anytime at all during the springtime, you'd realize that they're not using chemicals because the smell of pig manure is so strong you can hardly drive down the Autobahn, and that's why you drive fast with your windows open. Yeah. But yeah, they just farm uh, more of a traditional manner that's been going on for centuries, and the food quality is higher. Truth of the matter is the same thing. I work with the Maasai tribe out in Kenya. And if you look at the teeth on those natives over there, they're much better than Americans' teeth because their nutrient in their food is so much denser, and they actually do better. Their immune systems are stronger too.
That's interesting. Now, from my research, I've heard that the Maasai mostly are meat eaters.
Yes.
Is that true from your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, they either eat meat or you've seen them shoot arrows into the jugular vein of cows and bleed it out into a jar, then mix wheat and things with it and kind of make a paste like a kind of like a maybe a Hawaiian poi or something that they eat. And so, but it's heavy protein and some of it's blood-based, which of course here in America we wouldn't do, but they're healthy, very healthy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of where things go. This year, I finally got settled in and got looking at it a little bit more. And I wrote my very first book this year, which is this one, which is called Farming God's Way. And
That's fantastic.
I thought, well, if we're supposed to be farming and farming according to the Bible, and I'm going this direction because regardless of what you say, maybe if you're not a Christian, that's fine. You might say, well, I don't believe any of that at all. But if you go back as a Christian, you look at the fact that, God created the earth and everything in it and everything else. And what was man's very first job? He was a steward. He had to name all the animals, and then he was told, you raise the animals and take care of them so that when you're done with them, in other words, taking care of your family, they are regenerated to the point that you hand them off to the next generation who now has exactly what I created that can sustain them for the next 100 to 200 years. And that's in Genesis. So if you look at that and then you go forward, and I don't know where Roger's on here. Roger Savior and I were talking about this the other day. Man does what man does. Man decided that he knew better. So then man decided, I'm going to go find where there's food where I don't have to work hard and grow it. So he'd find a stream that had, trout in it or salmon, or he would find a place where he could move his goats into that would sustain them. And then he would totally let the goats or the cows graze, or he'd fish in the stream till the fish were all gone. And when it was all gone, it was no big deal. There wasn't that big of a population. They just move and go to the next place. Well, then all of a sudden you wind up with the landscape that looks like, northern part of Saudi Arabia or outside of Egypt. Everything was decimated, and farming didn't leave it sustainable. It just depleted it. And that was followed, later on by, we were talking about Europe with your feudal system where every lord had his area, and then he oversaw how things were raised. And people kind of got back into a little bit of what we talk about now, which is the local food movement, raise everything yourself. The kings and things would tax them, they'd take their portion, but leave enough for people to live. And everything was sustained within that local community. That went forward right on up till about 1917, after World War I, I'd say, 18. And we had the Green Revolution, where now you have the advent of the automobile and tractors and things to be able to harvest your land a whole lot better. So man became very productive, and he produced a whole lot more and didn't need as many people in the towns and didn't mean as many people on the farm. So those jobs went away. The towns all shrunk, and people headed on in to work at the factories, the Ford factory or John Deere or whatever else. But they headed on into town, and the town started to grow, and the little communities in the out in the rural area all started to shrink. And with that went the food quality, and with that went the concern about having nutrient dense food because it was all shipped to the cities, and towns became much more effective and efficient with their production of food, but they didn't have as many people. There was no reason to be out there. So they all moved into the cities, and you had that great big green revolution where everybody's productive, but the populations all moved to your big cities: Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Seattle. All the big cities grew, and the little rural towns just kind of shrunk. And that was okay until we had such things as the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. And everybody saw and started to reap the product of their refusal to look after the land and regenerate it. Now, we can jump forward to just last week. And just last week, an interview with a young man in Oklahoma, and also an interview with another young man running a farm in Illinois, are all complaining about the fact that there's dust blowing everywhere and they can't keep the topsoil on the ground. Well, why is that? That's because they are in monoculture, only growing one thing. They believe in harvesting it and then turning the ground over and opening it up to the wind and those types of things. And when the wind comes, it all blows away. And in Oklahoma, their answer to that was, we'll just cut down the trees. And when it blows, yeah, seriously. And when it blows, we'll just let the dust bowl blow away and it'll go past. And then we'll get out there when it clears and we'll put fertilizer back on the ground and then we'll plant. Now, they couldn't even do that in Illinois. They got so the Dust Bowl was so strong they couldn't go out and plant. So our federal government took our tax dollars and passed a $300 million support package to give to the farmers because of their lousy farming practices. So it becomes a great, yeah, go ahead.
This is interesting. It sounds like what you're telling me is the local people in those areas where the Dust Bowl happened, they didn't learn the lesson. Is that what you're telling me?
That's what I'm telling you.
See, I live here in the Western U.S. I did live in Missouri for 10 years, but other than that, I've been in the Western U.S. most of my life. And I've been involved in agriculture my entire life. And I just kind of thought that from most of what I have learned is that a lot of those people in the Oklahoma, Texas area where that Dust Bowl happened, they had a lot of that ground seeded down and they couldn't do as much tillage as they used to. Is this just propaganda that I've heard?
I don't think they're not doing as much tillage. What they're doing is they're actually clearing as much land as they used to, and trees get in the way. So let's say you own 200 acres, but you've only got 100 acres that is pasture land. But you know, if you could cut down another 50 acres of trees, now you got 150 acres of pasture land.
Yeah.
And when that pasture land gets turned over, now you have 150 acres of bare soil.
Right, right.
Which becomes problematic.
Yeah. And we're trying to plant trees around here, trying to get more trees. And what we've seen is that when you have, anywhere from 10 to 20 trees per acre, your land is more productive. We're growing more grass here in Nevada on the places where we have a few trees than where we don't. So that's more feed for the cattle. You just have to manage it.
Yeah, Mark Shepard, you've heard of him? Read some of his books? Okay, Mark and I, we've talked quite a bit. But indeed, the best kind of ground that you can have is a savanna, which is a combination of grassland and trees, of course. And you not only get the grass underneath, but you get protection for your animals and you've got built-in shade and, it's just more productive per acre. And you've also, depending upon what trees you put on the ground, you now can also be vertically productive. When I was in Africa, a lady had 2,000 acres and it was all olive trees. And she says, what can I do to increase my production? So then we started with putting sheep under the olive trees and following the sheep. Of course, we followed with the chickens. Now, me being a boy from Idaho, didn't see the pitfalls that I had just told her to do. So 2 weeks went by and she called me back and she says, the sheep are doing great, but the chickens are all gone. And I said, what happened? She says, baboons. And I thought to myself, yeah, we don't have baboons in Idaho.
Yeah, that's a little different.
Yeah, they literally turned over the cages and ran off and killed all the chickens and ate them.
Wow.
So we followed that up with Anatolian shepherds, repopulated the chickens, and then the chickens disappeared, and all the Anatolian shepherds disappeared because the men came home to work the farm from the city and liked the dogs and took them.
Wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so there are certain challenges. Uh, Joel Salatin and I had this discussion one time. He came out to Idaho and was given a class, and I said, Joel, one of the things we all have to be cognitive of is the fact that when you go into a region, assess the region. Things that work in Virginia don't work in Nevada, and things that work in Missouri don't work here on the eastern plains of Colorado. The soil's different. I'm at 7,000 feet. My soil's not bad. I've got water that's 4 feet down below, but I can't grow anything uh, of any size grass wise because of the elevation. The elevation affects the grass, and uh, I haven't found anybody that can figure out. You plant forbs. I mean, you can plant potatoes here and some other stuff, but you're not going to get a good grass crop here. The elevation just knocks it off. It goes dormant and stops after
No.
about 50 days.
Yeah, yeah. When you talk about assessing a region, uh, do you have a checklist that you would go through or anything like that?
Yes, I probably would use Alan Savory's checklist between brittle and other things, but you can go through and you look, of course, number of days of sun, how much water's in the region, do an assessment and probably a quick analysis of the makeup of the soil. Like right here, I've got heavy mica. It's got a lot of degraded granite in it and other things. But you go back out to Virginia, you've got a heavy loam base and some clay mixtures, and its reaction upon upon the water is totally different. How long it holds water and how it processes that sort of thing, and getting down. Australia, I saw the Jared was talking to what was his name from Australia a couple of days ago, but the root systems there in some of those areas get down 6, 7 feet all the way through that loam. You'd never do that out here. It just wouldn't work. So you have to kind of assess what the soil is, what the nutrients in it are, how much sun you get per year, water fall. I mean, and you're up in Seattle, you're getting what, 45, 50 to 60 inches a year of waterfall. Down here, I get 10.
Yeah.
So that all then points towards what you plant, what you can and can't do. In Idaho, I could go out in April, start my planned grazing rotation. By July, I had grass that was so tall I had to stand on the foot pegs of my four-wheeler to see over the top of it when I was driving through. I harvested and cut round bales in July that would carry me through the winter. And by September, all the grass would go dormant and you're done. You're on into September, you're back on hay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've just got to get to learn the land that you're working and what it can and can't do. And that, of course, impacts upon what you do to regenerate the area you're working with. Most people will tell you, which I'm sure you're doing too, is which putting, trying to get the carbon sequestration back up, trying to get more nutrients into the soil by using fertilizer and urine and rotating cows and doing all that, so you can build that, that soil. And that's just the way to do it. Some years will take longer than others, which kind of goes into, we got up into the whole industrial farming thing, and people after World War II, we had all these chemicals that were laying around, and they used them for fertilizer. And people started realizing that you fertilize the ground, you get heavier crop yield. What they didn't understand was the impact those chemicals had on the ground and also on humanity in general. And heavy, heavier crop yield, although it sounds really good, meant monoculture, meant you had to buy things like in Oregon, you buy a combine, or you buy a wheat or a corn combine out in Iowa or things. They're running what, $350,000, $400,000 a copy. And so you don't really own your farm anymore. That bank owns your farm, and you're making payments, which goes back to just at the end of the Green Revolution, which was, it got into a vicious cycle. Farmers would go buy seed in the spring from the bank would finance it, they would go out and plant it, they would pray for good weather until it got up, they would harvest it, they would have to take whatever the government was giving them per bushel, and they'd wait and try to time it out the best they could before they harvested. Then they turn it in, they take that money, and their very first stop was right back down to the bank so they wouldn't come foreclose on their farm. And that's kind of where we're at right now with some of these major farms now, is that they are so in debt and they can't even just go buy the seed anymore because Monsanto and other things have, there's only 7 seed producers in the world right now that literally control the seed farmers use, and they won't let you grow your own. Have you seen the lawsuits in Canada where the guy tried to keep his own seed back and put it down, and he finds himself almost losing his farm because Monsanto came back and sued him, and he said, well, I didn't use your product, and they said, well, the wind blew it in, and we don't care whether you used it or not. This was genetically engineered corn, and we can prove it, and you owe us money and all the seed you've harvested. So you've kind of made a deal with the devil if you continue to go industrial. But the problem is that there's only 2% right now in America, maybe 3, since we're moving forward, of America that can classify themselves as regenerative farmers based upon what you have done with regenerative farming, the use of manure and all that type of thing. And then 12% have got some of their farm in a transition, but everybody else farming is out there doing conventional farming.
The big argument that I hear for that, and I don't agree with this, but the argument I hear, and I'm always trying to educate people against this, but what they say is, and the people saying it are your industrial farmers. They say, well, there's no way we can raise the crop and grow the food without all of the inputs, without the industrial machine. And I don't agree with that, but what are your thoughts on that? And how do we help to educate people so that they just would get switched over from the industrial to the regenerative quicker?
Yeah, you could actually do it with data because that's all they're going to listen to anyway. Come in and show me the numbers, right? And the way you do that is you don't tell them that you're going to come right in and switch it over in a year or two. Like first of all, you wouldn't be able to get rid of the equipment, but we're looking at a 5-year to 7-year process that would make that transition. It takes 5 years just to get glyphosate out of the soil and a lot of those pesticides. So what you do is you come up with a really good plan, and you execute it in portions and you slowly expand. And what they have shown, and data supports this, is that the first couple of years, you're probably not producing as much as those industrial farmers are using the chemicals. But at year 3, 4, and 5, you're on par with them. And by 6 and 7, you're out producing them. And that's proven by data. You can pull up the data. USDA's got it. Some of your major universities have got it. But the problem is most people don't have the wherewithal or the financial base, and the government and the banks aren't forgiving enough to say, okay, you're not going to make as much money on year 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to realize you're not going to be able to pay all that stuff back. But starting with 4, 5, and 6, you're on par, and beyond that, you're making money again. And we're willing to sit that out just so you can make that land regenerative and not full of chemicals. And what you've got to convince those people, the banks, and even the industrial farmer, is that you are ultimately going to slowly hit a point where the cost of fertilizers and those things is going to eat into your profit so much that you're once again going to have to expand and go in debt. And what I see from that is that they go in debt and then the corporations come in and buy them out. And they're no longer farming for themselves. They're farming for Tyson, or they're farming for somebody else, telling them what to raise. Here's all your chicken houses, and all you got to do is just feed those chickens and buy feed from us, and we'll come in at nighttime and we'll butcher them for you, and then we'll do it again. And oh, by the way, we've got a 100-year lease on your farm, and you are done farming, and so is your next generation.
Yeah.
And those are just a fact. So you're exactly right, but you've got to get them to understand that things have got to change. And the way you can really get them to understand why things have got to change, is you scare them. America loves fear. Look what happened during COVID. And you know how you scare them? You go and say, okay, you're going to continue to poison the ground all the way up to the Great Lakes, all the way down to the Mississippi flowing into the Gulf of America. Notice I got that right. Uh, and now we have dead zones where nothing even in the oceans grow. And it's dying. Why is it dying? It's dying because you're killing the land 3,000 miles upstream. And it's flowing all down this river into the streams and things. And if that isn't enough to get your attention, then this should be. If you take the glyphosate usage area over the breadbasket of America, Iowa, Indiana, and all the way down along the Missouri and all that, and you overlay that with the cancer map, they exactly match. So what we're seeing is a heavy outbreak of cancer, which can be directly related and attributed to the use of the chemicals going into our food that we are eating, coming from those regions where the high use of herbicides and pesticides are done by industrial farmers. Yesterday, I cut a video, and I didn't get any hate mail, although there might be some black Suburbans driving around today, but I'm not sure. But I told people, I said, listen, I love my independence as much as anybody. And when the county health agent shows up at my door and tells me it's illegal to kill a chicken outside because it might jump out of your arms and get dirty, you look at them and go, are you out of your gourd? People have been killing chickens outside for as long as I can remember. But there's actually a law in some states that's against the law. You can't kill a chicken outside. It has to be over a concrete floor, and you have to have a 3-hole stainless steel tub to immediately put it in and clean it. But what's happening is that nobody's being held accountable. And I don't like that thought any more than anybody else. But if you were the father of a woman who lost their child due to the fact that they were sprayed with glyphosate over a field, and you have something that's directly attributable to the fact that it causes a 33% probability of spontaneous abortion, and you lost your child, you might go, you know what? We can't be doing this anymore. We have to find a better way.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. This is really good, you know. And the more people talking about this, the better. So I had all my kids when they were young. I was living in Missouri at the time. And of course they used Roundup all the time. We were out in the country and they were spraying it everywhere, all around. And now, 2 of my kids have health problems. And in the recent lawsuits against, I guess it's Bayer now. I
Fair
still
now, yeah.
say Monsanto, but um, they, the things that they're saying are causing these specific health problems. I'm sure it goes back to the Roundup that my kids were exposed to at that time in their life, which is too bad, you know. And yet I went to college at that time. And they said, "Oh, there's the greatest thing. We call it Roundup, and it's completely decomposed in 2 weeks, and it's safe. It's safe. It's safe." That was the story that they kept telling us. And of course, we pay a lot of money to go to college to get our degrees. And once we graduate, we're proud of the degree we have. And I think people ought to be proud of what we learn, right? We ought to be
Right.
proud of the
Yeah.
accomplishments we make.
Right.
But now, at this point in our lives, now that we know that a lot of these things are not true that we learned in college, do you think that we need to just forgive the reality of some of the things we learned and move on with truth?
Well, categorically, I'll say moving on with the truth is the right answer every time. Uh, but it goes back to we've got to assess where we're at, and here's where we're at. I mean, whether you like it or don't like it, this is where we are. What we need to do, and this goes back to my strategic planning days, you got to come up then with a plan. If you identify a problem, Then you got to come up with a plan to fix it. And it's got to be a workable plan, not just one of hope. I hope this works. Hope is not a method. I had a general tell me that one time. I said, well, I hope I don't get killed. He says, well, that's not a method. When you cross the line of departure out there, he says, you better have things loaded and be ready to shoot because that's what's going to save you, not hope. And I went, gotcha. Yeah. So we need to get more people educated. And I don't think that education is going to go on in the universities because the universities are paid for by the government and the government is paid for by big pharma. And big pharma is in charge of all the drugs that go into your dairy cow, and they're the ones pushing for the mRNA vaccines on your pigs, and let's vaccine all the chickens instead of like Joel or you probably believe too, and that is okay. It goes through a flock. Those that die, you put in the compost, and those that live, you breed.
Yep.
And you go with something more natural that gets on into the future so you can withstand things. I mean, I hate to say this, but even Fauci said that, during COVID. Well, the best immunity you can get is the one you get yourself. Until then, take all these drugs, which may or may not kill you now or in the future. But yeah, we've just got to come up with a plan to fix it because it's not going to get better. I can't see any scenario where as we go forward without taking steps to move more towards regenerative farming and not sustainable. I did a video on that the other day too. I mean, sustainable is a nice word and you want to sustain, but it's from the word sustain, which means you want to be able to maintain what you've got. We can't do that and get ahead of the game. We've got to regenerate. We've got to figure out, and that might be one of the things when I saw that your title to your Jared's thing here, I said, profitable regeneration. Well, I hope so, but it might take all your dollars just to regenerate for a while, which is moving on with, of course, with getting transition from industrial farming back to regeneration. It's going to take a while. It's not something we can just snap our fingers and say, okay, Mother Earth, now we realize we've done something wrong. Next year, we want to be able to just come in and we will do no-till and we will have crop rotation like Gabe Brown up in, North Dakota. And we're going to do planned grazing like Alan Savory. And we're going to do all this stuff and we're not going to vaccinate anything. And by the end of next year, we're all going to sing hunky dory and we can skip off down to the butcher shop, which shouldn't be just the 4 that are in the United States. So we've got a lot of work to do. And education is the first part of it.
Nice. I like that. I'm an educator, so I like that.
Yeah, well, I am too. That's why I wrote these books. This one, which kind of highlighted the problem, I did Beyond the Plow, which took it from okay, now we got to beyond the plow and not be tilling things up, and where do we go from here? And then the last one, which my daughter will love this, who's on the with us. This is my granddaughter's on the back of this 4-wheeler looking at my British whites.
Nice.
I used their picture. Yeah, she should give me the thumbs up. But this then goes for about this much of it, kind of highlights the problem. But the rest of it is now here's some steps you can take to fix it and how you do that. And we need to do things like we saw what happened during COVID with the processing centers, people getting sick and they closed them down. Then, what happened from that forward was the fact that people couldn't get their cows in for almost a year in some places to the closest processing center. Should we do what Thomas Massey out of Kentucky says with the Prime Act and say, as long as you sell it in the state and you have a state certified inspector look at it and certify the kill, you can sell in the local restaurants, you can sell in the local grocery stores, you can sell from me to you. Matter of fact, what most people don't realize, and I only know this because a policeman pulled me over. I'm crossing over from Wyoming into Colorado with 1,000 frozen chickens in the back of my truck and going to Boulder to the farmer's market. And the policeman pulls me over. He says, do you have a permit to come across state lines with all those frozen chickens? And I looked at him and I said, no, I don't. And he goes, oh, that's not good. I said, I got something better. I got the Treaty of 1812, which is called the Interstate Commerce Treaty, which allows me to coordinate with somebody in another state and transfer what I'm selling to them without any government interference. You want to read it? He read it. He said, have a nice day. Hope you have a good sale. And I went on to Boulder.
That's pretty good. He wasn't a jerk about it.
Well, yeah, most of those like in California, most of your state policemen are former Marines. So, if you're really good at fumbling out your former Marine Corps ID card instead of your driver's license, you usually get away with things.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Tell me a little bit more about your books. Do you have three of them then?
I've actually got, I've had a productive winter. We had blizzards here and I had nothing to do. So I sat down and like the defense plan I wrote for Turkey was 1,500 pages. So I'm really prolific when I sit down and decide it's time to write. So yeah, I've got three basically on where we're at. And they're all on my website there under radicalresilience.health. And they come off of Amazon. But I've got Farming God's Way. And this one is 300 pages. And it takes us all the way from creation of Earth up through pretty much 1985, 1990 start of the industrial farming revolution and what they were doing and where all those chemicals started to get used and everything else and why that was a bad idea. Beyond the Plow kind of takes it from there and talks about the balance between your passion for farming and the fact that you've got to make a living. So this kind of feeds into the fact that if you're not making a profit, you're not sustainable. And to do that, you need to know how to go from industrial to regenerative, and then also how to do everything else. I tell people, I say, farmers are the smartest people in the world. They don't want to believe me. I mean, just because we wear coveralls and cowboy hats and walk around with stuff on our pants that we usually probably shouldn't have on our pants, but they are. A good farmer not only knows genetics, he also knows agronomy. He knows how to build fence. He knows how to drive tractors. He knows how to be a veterinarian. He knows how to market all of his own things. He's his own finance manager. And when things get bad and somebody gets hurt, he's a doctor. You tell me any other profession that does all that sort of thing on a daily basis.
You're right. I totally agree. You are right on.
So that's
Farmers
what this
are
one's about. This one about, and then this one with my daughter's kids, my granddaughters, aren't they cute? They're almost as cute as the British whites. But anyway, this one literally goes into you want to transition. You don't want to be an industrial farmer anymore. In here is the 5-year plan. In here teaches you how to market. In here teaches you how to make that transition. And so you live through it because, like I said, it could be painful if you do it wrong, but you can get through it over a 5-year period and just don't rush. Do the plan, do your plan. And here I'm going to disappear for just a second, but it's going to be just a slide.
Yeah, this is fantastic information. I'm really glad that Glenn has written this. These are good books.
I'm back. Poor preparedness on my part. I had to leave the screen.
That's okay. I'm so glad you've written these books. These are the books we need right now.
This is the last one I wrote, and this is a regenerative planning manual. This teaches you how to write a business plan. And you talked about earlier, how do you do an assessment of your farm and how does it all come together? And how do you have a business plan to make a profit? Where are you going to put your money? How do you market all that? And I wrote this all up because I could. And so it goes into how to do a SWOT adjustment, do your assessment of your farm, market analysis, key areas to where you can market your food and all that sort of thing. And so you can buy this book, it's $12. All my books are just $12. I don't know whether that's because I couldn't think of any other number or just that seemed good enough. But so for $12, you buy the book and you start in the front and you just walk your way through it. And by the time you get to the end, you have a book that told you what you did and all the results of it right here in the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So these are available on Amazon, right?
Yes. Yeah. All under my name, Douglas G. Holloway.
Okay. And they're on your website, both.
And on my website. Yep.
Yeah.
Under radicalresilience.health.
Nice. So it's interesting that the name of your website is .health. That's interesting. What do you think the most healthy food is that people can eat?
Well, you're gonna corner me here because I'm thinking most healthy or what do I want to eat? I'm kind of a carnivore, you know. This is a nice rib steak done out on my grill with a cold drink in my hand, not saying what that drink is. That's pretty hard to beat if it's raised on good grass that's high in protein and nutrient dense. The best, you know. Now I'll tell you where that dot health came from. My wife is the former head nurse of pediatrics for the United States Army. She's a master's prepared nurse. She wrote the well-being program for both the Army, the entire Army, and for the entire Air Force. And she runs her own health program here in Colorado Springs under healthrecoveryministry.org and also under this website. She has a leg on it. So she does the health side of things, and that's why the dot health is there. So she works on a daily basis, working with people all the way up to level 4 cancer people, of which she's worked with 4 this year. Those 4 level 4 cancer patients are all cancer free now.
Okay, so this is fascinating to me. I mean, okay, so I'm addicted to farming. I used to be addicted to tillage, but
Mhm.
I have learned better. And so now I don't till anymore, unless I need to, but like I haven't tilled for years. I do think it has a place, but we do way too much tillage. I'm a soil scientist. I've studied all the soil food web, all that stuff, and what all the creatures in the soil are doing. And those creatures in the gut, in the human gut, they have an important function. And from everything that I've learned about health, is that we have to have healthy food and we have to have the healthy microbes in the soil to grow the food, and we have to have the healthy microbes in our digestive system to digest the food. You know, I think I've done a lot of research on health, and it's interesting because I've known quite a few people who have overcome cancer, and yet the powers that be tell us that, stage 4 cancer means you're dead. And here you're telling me that people are recovering. And I know people who have recovered, and it's because they have focused on healthy food. And a lot of these people, they've just, they've eaten what they call the modern people call it the paleo diet.
Mhm.
Um, I I don't know that I want to subscribe to any particular diet like that, but if we would just eat food that doesn't have a label on it, I think we would all be much healthier. What do you think about these things I'm saying?
Well, the old saying, you are what you eat, you are what you eat. What goes into your gut affects every piece of your body. There's more receptors there than in your brain. And it does have a direct impact on everything you do. That's pretty much it. The problem we're running into now is what we talked about here just a little earlier was the fact that you have to have healthy food. You can't be eating food that has chemicals on it that are going to attack your gut microbiome or kill off those things that are trying to keep you healthy or support your immune system, to include the messenger RNA that runs back and forth and tells your body how to repair itself and where to attack with your immune system and all that other good stuff. It's all got to be functioning well, and the bottom cornerstone to all that is the food you put into your body, and every now and then a fast. Quit eating. Take
Yeah,
a day. Let your body recover.
yeah. It's true. I just finished a 24-hour fast yesterday, you know, and then ate this morning and I'm feeling good.
Yeah. So it really is what you put into your body, what you are. And if you want to get healthy, these 4 I told you about, every one of those started off with spiritual. Make sure you're aligned with your thinking and what you believe in and what you're willing to follow spiritually. Followed, of course, by the fact that you've got to get your body detoxed and back to eating nothing but nutrient dense food that supports your natural immune system and the regeneration of your body itself. If you don't do that, then you're losing the battle anyway.
Right, right. So for people listening, I'm just thinking when you say nutrient dense food, Does that mean when you go to the grocery store, you look for labels that say nutrient dense?
Well, I don't think we have too many of those in the grocery store. So yeah, we start off with going, and you know as well as I do the fact that when you start off with organic, you're going, well, it's organic. Well, okay, basically all that says is it's one step above what you had before, because even all the organic stuff are owned by what, same four great big companies that have put their little webs down into everybody else. And some of, and they even a couple of years ago were trying to tell people that, well, we're going to approve this because it's close enough to organic to certify it organic. So we recommend everybody eat at least organic and do your research to figure out what foods are good for you and are generally nutrient dense. Spinach, okay? Spinach is good for you. Fermented foods are great for you, but most people don't eat them. But they're really good for you. Raw milk. Oh my goodness, we're going to die from milk fever. Oh, come on. Give me a break, will you? I've got raw milk down in my you know, down in my refrigerator right now. It's really good for your gut and your whole system, and it's not going to kill you. And if you have lactose intolerance, you may find you can actually drink raw milk because, especially if it's A2, because that also helps your heart things. So there's just once again, back to that original statement was get educated. It's your
Yeah,
life. It's your health. Take charge of it.
that's right. That's right. I feel bad for people because don't 99% of everybody get their food from grocery stores or restaurants? I kind of think that's true. And so I mean, I kind of tricked you. It wasn't fair of me, and it was probably rude to say, talk about a label that says nutrient dense because I don't think there is a label that says nutrient dense because I'd have no idea because I
No,
don't
I have
shop
never
at the
seen
grocery
one.
store. But even if it did say that, I would be very leery of it to know if it's actually true. I actually eat pretty nutrient dense food. I have grass-fed beef and lamb, and I eat sauerkraut and that I make. I raised 300 cabbages last year. We made 50 bottles of sauerkraut. I eat a bottle a week. So it's not a lot, but I have a portion of sauerkraut with every meal. I make fermented pickles out of cucumbers that I grow. I butcher my own beef. I have my own saw to cut it up. We have our own room to here on the ranch where our own cold storage and freezers. But I'm the anomaly. People can't do what I do. I think they should, but when you look at the billions of people in the world and the way that they live in you know, in the cities, what is the answer for these people? What do you think the answer is? Where do they get nutrient dense food?
Well, we're already, like I told you, we're already trucking in from 1,500 miles out food. So we just need to get it sourced from someplace else. Also, places like Detroit, the Knights of Columbus in Detroit contacted me when I was still living in Virginia, and we took vacant lots from those companies that went bankrupt, and they cleared them and they turned them into greenhouses and they started growing them there. They went back to the old Liberty gardens and were growing things there. People are learning to sprout. The whole radical resilience name on my website is the fact that we spent the last 4 years teaching people here in Colorado Springs through our church, how do you get resilient? Well, you learn to sprout. You learn to can. You learn to do your fermented foods and those types of things. You put away, you get a freezer and you freeze enough so you've got a minimum of 90 days of food to live on as you go forward in case there is a crisis. You drink raw milk if you can find it. So you just adjust your lifestyle. And the problem with most people throughout the whole world, but most people in general, it's a human trait, and that is those things require action.
Yeah.
You have to make up your mind, like I said, get your spirit straight and say, I no longer want to have type 2 diabetes. I no longer want to be having problems with the fact that every time I eat something, I feel sick to my stomach or that. Okay, then get educated, change your diet, Work into it slowly. You can't just jump into it because the body will revolt if you just jump into it in a great big way, but work into it slowly enough that you can do that. And just change who you are from the inside out, from that gut that's going to feed you, and go from there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I
then
love it.
show people the benefits of it.
Yeah, yep, that's right. I love it.
And to
So,
do that, the last portion here that I covered in a lot of these things is that requires a change of thought, and we've got to push our legislators to pass good rules and regulations to facilitate that type of lifestyle.
yeah, I agree completely.
Because if you don't, you get what happened during COVID. Oh, well, you didn't get a shot and you're my neighbor. You're not thinking about me. Okay. Maybe I was thinking about you and I didn't get the shot. I don't know. I mean, there's different things there. The research go out, but the truth of the matter is, you don't want to have that escape clause that says, well, the government told me I had to eat this stuff, so it's not my fault. No, it's still your fault. You just didn't make a decision and own it.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Glenn, from your background, um, how vulnerable do you think we are right now with all the stuff that's going on in the world?
Oh, you sure you want to go down this road?
Well, just keep it, just, yes,
uh,
because you have an interesting perspective than other people. I mean,
okay,
I grow my own food because for health reasons. I
right.
live in the middle of nowhere because I love it. The majority of people live in cities. The majority of people listening to this podcast are producers. Most of them are probably ranchers, beef ranchers, but all kinds of farmers and producers. So yeah, from your perspective of being very involved in the government, how vulnerable are we?
Well, as time has marched on and electronics have gotten more sophisticated, I mean, you don't even have to drive your car anymore. You should go out and tell it to where you want to go and it takes off with you. Uh, those meant they run on less electricity. And every time you downgrade the amount of electricity that a very sophisticated electronic support mechanism, whether it be a computer, a car, or a nuclear weapon, uh, you are now more vulnerable because it takes a lot less to take it out and disrupt a normal flow. So years ago, there's a book out there, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it's a good read. It's called 1 Second After. And it's written about what are the effects of an EMP attack. And it's very sobering because I wrote the plan. And as time has marched on, our susceptibility and what an EMP attack on America would do has gotten greater. In other words, you had a diode that would withstand a certain amount of flux, 40 years ago, and now you've got a little diode that all you got to do is put your finger on it. And if you maybe had a bad day and rubbed your hair with a balloon or something, it would short out. Uh, but we are susceptible. The world is the world is a dangerous place, but not one you should be afraid of. Fear causes sickness. Stress causes sickness. So have a healthy assessment of where we're at, watch what's going on in the world and how it impacts on you or whether it does and what you can do to mitigate it in your own, like I said, grow sprouts. You can, if you've, a lot of the HOAs now are allowing people to have chickens in their backyards. No roosters, but you can have 3 chickens. Okay. Grow 3 chickens. Go out there and have them get rid of the bugs around your house and everything else. But we are susceptible. We are very susceptible. And if let's say there'd be a significant over a 5-year period, there would be a significant deaths resulting from that up and beyond 70%. And the way you mitigate all that is being prepared and knowing that you just got to be prepared for at least a minimum of 3 days from a natural crisis like the flood back in North Carolina or the fires that were going on down in California or other things. You need to maintain a stock. So if you have to withstand that, for a period of time. 90 days is what I recommend, but you know, everything's gonna shut down in 3 days if the food flow coming into your town is disrupted by anything, whether it be fuel, breaking the road. Boston had a water main break and it flooded out the road that went to one quarter of the town. In 3 days, they had to activate the National Guard and bring in MREs to feed people.
Interesting.
So it's not a safer world.
You say your wife's gonna kick you, so that's pretty funny. And I agree. I don't like the gloom and doom
Yeah.
because we already know the problems. Everybody
Yeah.
knows the problems. The beautiful thing that I hear you saying, Glenn, is the solution. And the solution is get some basic education and do what you can. If you are in the city, have a chicken, grow a tomato plant. Go to the grocery store and buy some non-perishable food so you have something. If you're a rancher, do more than just be good at ranching. Learn to cut your own beef. You know,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
maybe not as a business, but so you can feed your family and your neighbors. Most of the ranchers I know do know how to butcher. Maybe they don't know how to make all the fancy cuts, but they can feed themselves. So I hear you singing a tune that is very positive, and I appreciate that.
Well, and I've been beating this drum for a long time. There is no reason why we working together, and that's the other thing I want people to understand. You are not alone. You are not alone. We're a community. If something happens, you're not going to run down the street and say, "Oh, this is only affecting me." No, it's just not going to happen that way. So you're not alone. So that old push at one time of get to know your local farmer. Yes, get to know your local farmer. Get to know what you can do. I have people now who are using grow towers in their houses. I've got one that's got one sitting in her tub. She says showers are good enough. I went, oh, okay, well, showers are good enough. So because she's putting water in it, and it overflows every now and then. But do what you can do, get educated, take action, and then form a community that you work with. And so if something happens, you're not alone.
Yeah, that's right.
And that means CB radio, you know, learn how to set up alternate communications like the CB or the GMRS radios and things. I've got people that we taught how to do that last year. We literally took packets to the church. We had 500 people show up, and we gave each one of them a packet so they could go home, put seeds in water the next day, cover it up with with a paper towel and stick it in some soil in a closet. 3 days later, bring it back out, stick it in the window, and now they've got a shoebox that now is sprouting sprouts to put on their sandwiches. And you
Yeah,
just you
that's
just
great.
keep rolling that through, putting the chickens in the backyard, and do emergency recall rosters. Test it. Something happens. Okay, electricity's gone out. How are you going to talk to anybody? Are you going to stay? I did a video. When you go on this website, Radical Resilience, I've done lots of videos. I've got all kinds of stuff there that people can just pull down for free and look at. One of the ones I did was called "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" from that song,
Uh-huh.
and it showed what happened during Katrina. Well, they didn't act fast enough, and so all the roads are flooded with people. Okay, then you were forced to stay. You had better hope you had gotten prepared for that by putting some food in your house and having extra water and all the other stuff that goes on. Or you make the decision early enough that you stock somewhere else and you're going to go there. But if everybody floods out on the highway, you're not going anywhere. So
Yeah.
that's the whole assessment thing. And you learn to do those assessments working as a community and with the local governments to get up-to-date information and then making the right decision. Just get educated, learn how to deal with it. And if you don't have anybody to deal with it, and I went to the church on this, the Bible says we're supposed to take care of the widows and orphans. I looked at my pastor and I said, this church here would make a good Alamo. He just looked at me and he says, "What do you
Right.
mean by that?" I said, "Well, you can't leave all those widows out in town all by themselves with nobody looking after them and everything going on and gangs looting things and stuff. You're going to have to go out and bring them into the church and have a place where we can take care of them. So start thinking about that."
Right, right. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here real quick and just show you. You keep talking about education, which is fantastic. We've got our Profitable Regeneration Summit coming up, and Jared will be at that event, and he'll be running that event. But we've got such a good lineup of speakers. Um, so we're gonna have a keynote speaker. Burke Tykart's gonna be here. We've got Alejandro Carrillo,
Mhm.
Bart and Sonny Miller, Del Fickle, Dr. Liz Haney, Jim
Yeah,
Garish,
there's Jim. Yeah.
Josh Adams, Keith Burns, Steve Campbell, Alan Crockett, Todd Churchill, Jordan Steele, Clay Connery, Andrew Millison, Cam King, and Wally Olson. These are some of the top leaders in regenerative agriculture, mostly the ranching side of it. If you're in the cover crop, I mean, Keith's gonna be there if you're doing farming and needing to raise cover crops. If you're into gardening and all that stuff, like permaculture, Andrew Millison's gonna be there. But these are the people to listen to. And so, I mean, this is coming up, it's coming up soon next month. We've got 18 days, April 15th and 16th. Let everybody know about this. Everybody listening to this, get on. This is a free event. You can ask these guys questions. There's a lot to learn here. Jared does this as a service to bless people's lives.
And
And
I think that's outstanding because, as you know, we're trying to get people self-sufficient, but we're also trying to get young farmers into the farming industry.
yeah, yeah,
And one of the things I used to always have a rant about was, oh, but you want them to come to your class and you want them to pay $1,000 to be there for a couple of days. That doesn't that doesn't work real well generally. Or my wife and I worked with the Wounded Warrior program in Virginia. We took them out to Joel's place and we taught them how to farm out there at his place. And doing the classes for free. Just get the education to them.
yeah,
Get
yeah.
them started. I used to call that stuff chain teaching. I'm going to teach you, and you take the next link and you go teach somebody else. That's my
Nice.
charge for you. You make sure it goes forward.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And 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 I don't think it needs to be learned as you know, it doesn't need to be learned necessarily in the brick house universities because they will tell you to put chemicals on it and you can't get rid of your weeds unless you spray them and uh, and now they're advocating all that with great big drones that'll come over and spray an area. There's a lady just north of you called me up last week. She says, I got hawkweed and I've got not cactus, Canadian thistle. She says, and I've been spraying them using this drone. She says, and it's really expensive, but the area is hard to get at. And I said, why don't your cows eat it? And she says, what do you mean? I said, I trained my cows to eat it. I said, I'd get it out early in the year, and I said, I'd hem them in with an electric fence, and they had nothing else to eat but that Canadian thistle. And after a while, they liked it. And every spring, they'd run right down to the Canadian thistle and eat it all up. I said, within 2 years, I didn't have any more Canadian thistle in that area.
That's fantastic.
So we've got to educate the upcoming generations too. And I see that as our responsibility. I mean, I'm 72, so I'm not, somebody says you want to go out and pull calves this weekend, I kind of go, I'll come out and watch.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we need to do with people and people that are transitioning, get in alongside them. If you want them to do it, help them.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on with us today, Glenn.
Oh, it's
Thank you
been
for
my pleasure.
sharing
I
your
enjoyed it. I didn't
heart.
know what to expect exactly.
Well, it's just, we know that you're a leader out there and you're teaching, you're educating. We wanted to hear your voice. you have such an interesting background. Most people in agriculture don't have a background also in what's going on in the military. So
Yeah, well, one of the areas we didn't cover was that although I'm a former Marine and Army guy, they actually drafted me to go to the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and I had a $500 million budget I ran for basic research. So the finance side of that's very important. I'm wholeheartedly behind the fact that you've got to make money while you're doing this, or you'll come to an end sooner or later anyway.
yeah, yeah, you gotta, it's a business. Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of people love the farming because they grew up in agriculture and they want to carry on that lifestyle, but they don't understand the business part of it. And that's where
right.
a lot of the farms have had serious problems, in the last 50 years. That's just you look at the history of it. So we've
Well,
got to be teaching the finances, the marketing, the whole thing.
yeah, I was a local advertising chief for the Army, so I got that too. Uh,
Nice, nice.
but yeah, I mean, that's why I wrote this one book. It's like if you could just buy a book and work your way through it, some of those areas you don't know, it'll lead you step by step to do it. And
Yeah,
just for 12 bucks, it's like, it's fine. It's a good idea. Just take the initiative.
right, right. Yeah, it sounds like everybody needs your books, and we need to continue to listen to what you're saying. So thank you so much for being on. Appreciate it so much. Do you have any last words before we close up today?
None other than the fact that you've got my email address in the chat. You've got my website in the chat. I am retired. I'm 72. I'm retired. This is what I live for, is doing stuff like this. So I don't feel like I'm going to be inundated if somebody wants to contact me and ask some questions or go from there. And yeah, we're all in this together. Don't think you're out there all by yourself. Alan Savory had a meeting on Joel Salatin's farm, Polyface, and I was sitting there when Alan looked at him and said, "Joel, you know how to do all this. You've written 9 books. You're self-sufficient. But if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, all these farmers around here are going under, and you're here all by yourself, and that's not going to last long." And I watched him totally change his attitude. It was good. So that's where we're at.
Right. That's right.
And
That's
anytime you want to contact me or anything, I'm always here. Always open for anybody that wants to talk.
fantastic. I would encourage everybody listening to this, reach out to Glenn. These things will be in the show notes for the podcast, the way to contact Glenn and to contact Ag Steward. If you're finding that you're struggling on your farm or your ranch, reach out to Ag Steward. We are there to help you with whatever it is that you need to make your ranch profitable. Sometimes it's simply you need somebody to talk to over a period of time so that you can stay accountable to do the things you know that you need to do. We are here as a service to be able to do that. And thank you so much for being on today, Glenn. And we just one last reminder, don't forget our free meeting on April 15th and 16th. And um the sign up for that is in the show notes. So thank
Yep,
you
I'm
very much.
already signed up and I'm going.
Nice, nice. That'll be fantastic to have you there.
Thanks for having me today, and really
You
nice meeting
bet.
you, William.
You
We'll,
bet.
all
Thank
right.
you. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.